Good time and welcome to Timeless Hub. Today we are diving into a complex topic, West versus Russia, who's the better partner? A review through coup, leadership change and invasions. Can you choose a partner promising freedom but often delivering chaos, or a power that ensures stability at the expense of democracy? Stay tuned as we break it all down with facts, history and deep analysis. Comparing Western, particularly American and European interventions with those of Russia across military coups, invasions and leadership changes provides a complex picture. Both sides have used military force, political interference and economic pressure to secure their interests, but their strategies and justifications differ. Let's break this down. Military coups and leadership overthrows. Western-backed coups and regime changes. The West, especially the United States, has a long history of supporting coups and overthrowing leaders, often in the name of democracy or protecting strategic interests. Iran, 1953. The United States and United Kingdom helped overthrow Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he nationalized oil resources, installing the Shah, whose rule led to the 1979 revolution. Guatemala, 1954. The CIA helped remove President Jacobo Arbenz for nationalizing US-owned land, leading to decades of civil war. Chile, 1973. The United States backed a coup against democratically elected President Salvador Allende, installing dictator Augusto Pinochet. Libya, 2011. NATO-backed intervention led to the removal and death of Muammar Gaddafi, resulting in ongoing chaos and a failed state. Ukraine, 2014. While not a direct coup, Western support for pro-democracy movements helped oust pro-Russian President Yanukovych, escalating conflict with Russia. Effects: destabilization of regions while backing rebels groups, for example, Libya, Iran, Chile. Short-term US gains but long-term hostility from local populations. Rise of terrorism and lawlessness in some areas, for instance, Libya and Iraq. Russia also interferes in leadership changes, but its approach is more targeted towards securing influence in former Soviet states and allied nations. Hungary in 1956 and Czechoslovakia in 1968 saw Soviet forces crushing uprisings against communist rule. In 1979, a Soviet-backed coup installed a pro-Moscow government in Afghanistan, leading to the Soviet-Afghan War. From 2014 to the present, Russia annexed Crimea and supported separatists in eastern Ukraine after the Western-backed ousting of Yanukovych. And in Belarus from 2020 to the present, Russia backed Lukashenko after mass protests, ensuring his continued rule. The effects of these Russia-backed coups include the preservation of Russian influence in key regions. There's less direct military occupation compared to the West, but there's heavy political manipulation. Russia props up authoritarian leaders like Assad in Syria and Lukashenko in Belarus. Invasions and military interventions are another method less used by Russia to assert its influence and control. These actions often lead to prolonged conflicts and significant geopolitical shifts. Western invasions. The Vietnam War from 1965 to 1975 was a failed US intervention against communism that led to mass casualties and widespread destruction. The Iraq War in 2003 saw the US invade over claims of weapons of mass destruction, which turned out to be false. This invasion led to the emergence of ISIS and long-term instability in the region. In Afghanistan, from 2001 to 2021, the US waged war against the Taliban, but it ended with a chaotic withdrawal, restoring Taliban rule. In Syria, from 2014 to the present, US involvement created chaos, with the emerging and support for rebels has fragmented the country. Lastly, in Yugoslavia in 1999, NATO bombed Serbia to stop ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, which eventually led to Kosovo's independence. The effects of these Western invasions are significant. While some long-term presidents like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi were called dictators and removed, long-term instability is often followed from the supported rebels, causing the worst pain to the population. There has been a rise in insurgency, terrorism and refugee crises with unclear ways of leadership restoration. These wars have been incredibly expensive, with little lasting benefit for the US or the countries that were invaded. Now, let's turn to Russian invasions. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989 failed, weakening the USSR and giving rise to jihadist movements. In 2008, Russian forces invaded Georgia, taking control of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, keeping them under de facto Russian control. The special military operation of Ukraine, invasion according to Westerns, starting in 2014, led to the annexation of Crimea and support for separatists, resulting in ongoing war and global sanctions. In Syria, from 2015 to the present, Russia intervened to support Assad, helping him regain control, but at the cost of massive destruction. The effects of Russian invasions are quite distinct. Unlike the Western global reach, Russian interventions are more focused. They heavily rely on authoritarian allies rather than opting for direct occupation. This approach results in less regime change, but instead leads to more destabilization of opposition forces. In terms of human rights and political influence, the impact is profound. The actions taken often result in significant human rights violations and a shift in political dynamics, altering the landscape in ways that can be deeply unsettling for the affected regions. The Western approach promotes democracy, human rights and free markets, but selectively, as they are accused of double standards, untrusted behavior and hypocrisy. For example, it supports Saudi Arabia, despite human rights violations accused to the royal family and leadership. Westerners use economic sanctions and soft power to pressure governments, like in Iran, Venezuela and Russia. The West controls major financial institutions, such as the IMF and the World Bank, to push neoliberal policies. Often it supports human rights when convenient and in their interests, but ignores abuses by allies such as Israel against Palestine and the Gulf states. The Russian approach supports authoritarian leaders such as Assad and Lukashenko, with little concern for human rights. It uses less media like RT and more cyber warfare to influence elections and public opinion. Russia places less emphasis on ideological imposition, focusing more on strategic control rather than spreading democracy. They make sure to get more interest from the current regime, and being an authoritarian or long-term leader is not their business. It does not pressure allies on human rights, allowing for more stable but repressive regimes. Conclusion: who is the better partner? The Western pros include economic and technological benefits such as trade, investment and education. There is political support for democratic movements even if they are opposition in the target country, and military alliances like NATO offer security. However, the consequences are frequent regime changes leading to instability, hypocrisy in human rights enforcement, and the risk of military intervention or abandonment when interests shift. Generally, despite their might, they are not worthy to be trusted as they focus on their interests rather than mutual, taking example like Ukraine's scenario. On the other hand, the Russian pros are more predictable support for allies, no ideological pressure and military support, often leading to regime survival as seen in Syria and Belarus. Yet the cons include backing authoritarian regimes, economic weakness compared to the West, and fewer financial or technological benefits for partner nations. If a country values democracy, economic growth and technological progress, the West is a better partner, but at the risk of political manipulation and potential instability. If a country prioritizes sovereignty, regime survival and stability without ideological interference, Russia may be a more reliable partner, but at the cost of long-term development and political freedoms. Ultimately, both powers operate based on self-interest, and their partnership value depends on the goals and risks each country is willing to accept. From military coups and invasions to human rights and political influence, history has shown us that both sides claim to act for the greater good, but at what cost? So who should nations trust? Subscribe to Timeless Hub for thought-provoking insights on geopolitics, history, and world affairs. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should countries choose the West's promises or Russia's power play? Let's debate.